Hi there, my name is Nicole, and I'm going to tell you about my birth story for my fourth child. My first three children were girls, and they were all a very sort of standard textbook sort of birth. With my fourth child, he was a boy, and because I had hospital births for all three of my first children, I had always wanted to try a natural home birth. I was a doula at the time as well. It was something that I was really hoping that would work for me. So I engaged a midwife. My original birth plan included, being at home with all of my children, my mom, my sister, all in attendance. I had a playlist created for the whole labor period. I had bought all my supplies, everything that I needed to have the birth at home, in bed, in my own bedroom. My husband felt a little squeamish about catching the baby, but my eldest daughter said that she would love to do it, so that was the plan, that she was going to catch the baby when he was delivered. So as it approached my due date, or I should say my due date passed by a couple days, and I started to feel some contractions, but they weren't progressing. I would feel the contractions for a while and then they would go away. Nothing would continue to escalate. So I spoke to my midwife. I went in and had some tests done, and we did a stretch and sweep. The stretch and sweep I did have some contractions afterwards, but it still didn't progress. One morning I thought that I would try to move things along with some nipple stimulation. So I got out my breast pump and I started pumping milk, and it sure did bring the contractions on, fast and heavy and hard. But the problem was that once I stopped pumping, the contractions would also stop. So there was something going on that I wasn't quite sure of. I was just really frustrated because, you have a vision about how your birth story is supposed to be. And of course, when things change, it gets a little frustrating and upsetting. So the next morning, the plan was that my sister was going to come pick me up, and we were going to go for this really big long hike and see if we could, get things moving with walking. I had done some walking just in the neighborhood, and it didn't really work for me. But my sister thought that maybe if we did a little bit more strenuous, then maybe that would help to get things going. So I talked to my midwife that morning, and she said, I think you should just come in to the office. And actually, she called me back a little later before I was supposed to be heading over there, and she says, I'm over at the hospital right now. Why don't you come in over here and we'll check you out at the hospital? So I said, okay, no problem. Went over to the hospital, and I actually went with my mom and my sister. My kids had all gone to school because I said, guys, I don't think anything's going to happen. The contractions are not continuing. So go to school. I told my husband to go to work, and he worked downtown at the time. I said, go to work. Don't worry about it. If anything, I'll give you a call. Probably won't happen till this evening when everyone's back home. Don't worry about it. I've been through this before. I know how it goes. So I went into the hospital. My midwife sort of hooked me up to the fetal monitors, and we're all, my sister, myself, and my mom, were chatting away happily, and the midwife was chatting with us, but she was actually a little subdued, was watching the monitor. What I didn't know was that, I didn't know that what she was thinking about at the time was that with my third pregnancy, I had told her a story about when I was in labor, and while I was in labor, I got up during some really heavy contractions to go to the bathroom, and the contractions were just coming non-stop once I sat up. And when I got off the bed, there was blood on the bed. Nobody at the hospital ever, like, they didn't make a big deal about it. But when I told her this story, in her mind, she kept that story in her head, and she was looking out for something like that. And I did tell her that I was starting to see a little bit of spotting when I was going into labor, in and out of like these non-continuing contractions, non-progressing contractions earlier in the week. So after they, reviewed the results of the fetal monitor, she told me that everything looked okay. However, she thought it would be a good idea, if, just to be safe, that we have the birth in the hospital. I could still have a natural birth with my family there, and she would still be with me during the birth. However, just to be safe, because she remembered my story and she wanted to make sure that things were okay, because in her mind she was thinking that I was having a little bit of placenta abruptia with my previous pregnancy, and that potentially could be happening now and causing some problems, and being at the hospital was going to be the safer option. I was really upset. I cried about it a little bit, but when it came down to it, I knew that my safety, my health, and the baby's were what mattered most, and of course I would be able to still have the baby naturally in the hospital. So my mother and my sister were instructed to go back to the house and go get all my stuff. I was not allowed to leave, because I thought that was really weird. I thought she was being overly cautious, and she wouldn't allow me to leave, to go back home and get all my stuff. Because I wasn't prepared to come to the hospital for a birth, because I was going to have a home birth. So I wanted to be able to get all the things that I needed, but she wouldn't let me go. I thought that was a little odd at the time. And as my sister and my mom are talking about, sort of discussing the logistics, I was still connected to the monitor, and she's still watching my contractions and the baby's heart rate. The midwife left the room and called in the obstetrician, and her and the obstetrician watched the monitor, and I kind of shifted a little bit, and they all just they froze and immediately sprung into action, and I didn't know what was happening. They said, "Nope, Nicole, we're having this baby right now." And I said, What are you talking about? What's going on? We have to have a C-section. We have to get this baby out. When I moved, and I guess this was happening, but this time when it happened, it was very, very significant. The heart rate dropped very significantly, and alarms started going off, and code pink. I could hear that overhead, and I was confused. There was a bunch of people who just swarmed me. They were taking off my clothes, taking off my jewelry, and my mom and my sister were like, "What's going on?" They couldn't understand what was happening. The midwife said to her, "We're having the baby right now." To my mother, she said, "Mom, you're coming with us right now. Go and get suited up, and we're going into the OR right now." So that was pretty scary. My sister called my husband, who had to drop everything from downtown and speed over to the hospital, which he didn't make it in time because it was so quick, and he was all the way downtown, and we were in Ajax, so he didn't make it for the actual birth. We went straight into the OR. They got me all fixed up, and the baby was out within minutes. So what we found out was there were a few problems. The cord was wrapped around his neck, so that was number one. And it wasn't even long enough for him to descend. So this was part of the issue. The contractions would start because it was time for him to come out, but he couldn't come out. So I guess this was my body's way of telling me that something was wrong. The second thing that was wrong was that my placenta actually was starting to come separate. So there was placenta abruptia happening, and when he was born and the placenta was delivered, we actually took a picture of it. The midwife showed me the placenta, and it was just shredded. It was the worst looking placenta that I've ever seen, that she's ever seen. There was nothing lovely and rosy red liver looking, nothing like that. It was horrible. So the original birth plan obviously did not pan out. And it was really a surreal sort of experience at the time, because it was, I didn't know, I mean, with all my experience and knowledge about childbirth and being a prenatal instructor and a doula at the time, I knew everything, but when you actually have to experience it yourself, it's a whole different story. And in the hospital, while I was recovering from my C-section, I was so sad. I'm positive I had a bit of postpartum depression afterwards. I was overwhelmed, and I'm the type of person who's just, I do things myself. I don't like a lot of help. After I had my first few children, after my first birth and then my second, I was up that same day, at home with the new baby and a toddler, and just getting back to my normal life right away. And that just wasn't possible with this birth. And it was a really tough experience for me to have to go through. I couldn't drive for 4 weeks, and that totally messed me up, because I was not anticipating that. The kids have to go to school and be picked up, and groceries have to be, done, and all those things that I had to sort of resign myself to the fact that somebody else was going to have to do those things for me for a while. But to this day, I have problems talking about that story, because I feel like I was cheated. I still feel like I want to cry when I think about how things actually turned out, because I really wanted to have that experience of a natural vaginal delivery at home with my family all around me, and it just being, the kind of atmosphere that I wanted to create, and it didn't happen. And it was very distressing, and still is to this day. I actually think I was traumatized by that experience. But, of course, he was healthy, my son. I was okay. Nothing that I couldn't get over with a few stitches. The obstetrician did a great job of hiding those stitches in the crease of my stomach. And so I mean, it was fine, but emotionally, I don't think I've ever really gotten over it. Yeah, that's my birth story.